I'm going to go ahead and call our October meeting to order. And due to the CDC guidelines declaring coronavirus a health emergency and pandemic, this board may alternatively utilize virtual meetings during the period of emergency in accordance with OCGA 50-14-1G. Our board members and staff are calling in from their home or office locations. Thank you for joining us through live stream. We're grateful for the opportunity to continue to conduct business for the community during this time. Just a reminder, we ask if you will please mute your line unless you're speaking. And at this time, we'll take a roll call of board members. If present, please say here. Vice Chairman Sanders Griffith.
Here.
Board Member Becky Rumer.
Here.
Board Member Rodney Close.
Here.
And Mayor Skip Henderson.
Here.
Thank you all very much. We're ready to begin our meeting. And our first action item is approval of the minutes from August 10th, 2020. Do we have a motion for their approval?
So moved.
A motion by Becky. A second by Rodney. All in favor, please say aye or just raise your hand.
Aye.
The minutes have been approved. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'd like to bring to your attention a couple of retirees that we have coming up. Ms. Angie Pope, who most recently was working as an accounting clerk in financial services, and she's also worked in customer service, has 30 years of service with CWW, and she's retiring and was looking forward to some traveling with her husband. So she may be on the road as we speak. Certainly going to miss Angie and wish her well. And Ricky Brown worked as an apprentice at the North Columbus Water Resource Facility, our water plant, for 9 years. And we'll certainly going to miss Ricky and wish him well as well. Both of them will receive their signed resolutions, and we just wanted to bring this to the board's attention.
30 years, that's very impressive. We're going to need to create a new rule. If it's 20 years or more, they have to attend a meeting just so we can meet them. I'm always impressed with the longevity of employees at this organization.
Yeah, I certainly hate that they can't be we can't do it in person. It's kind of a shame we can't recognize them a little better, but we have to do what we can do.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Are you there, Danthea?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Slides. There we go. The overall change in the balance sheet for the period ending September 2020 was $1,022,825. That was the result of normal business operations. Actual combined revenues year to date are 99.33% of projected budget. Actual operating expenditures year to date are 81.66% of projected budget. When you look at our revenue to expense ratio, we're at 1.13.
Thank you, Danthea.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said thank you.
Does anyone have any comments or questions for Danthea regarding the financial report? All right. If not, we'll entertain a motion for approval of the report.
Move it.
There's a motion by Becky. Is there a second? Second by Rodney. All in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
The financials have been approved. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the board. How is everyone today?
Doing good, Adrian. Thank you.
Good. I'm here to share with you guys a little bit about one of our TV spots that we recently aired back in September. I don't know if you were able to see it. As you guys know, as an organization, pretty much everything that we do is done behind the scenes. And the only time the community really sees us or thinks about us is if there's a problem with their water, sewer services, or if they're interacting with us directly for some other reason. Otherwise, people don't know what we do. So one of the things that our group has been trying to do is to bring attention to the things that we do every day behind the scenes all the time. So we created a 24/7, 365 TV spot. Alex, if you want to go to the next slide. Thank you. And instead of playing it, I'm just going to kind of talk with you about it a little bit. And then if you're interested in viewing it, you can follow us on YouTube and take a look at it. What you're seeing here are a few snapshots from the TV spot itself. And so we have our meter services group checking on meters. One of our hydrant, well, I guess he's checking on the hydrants. And then we've got some guys utilizing some practice training equipment that we have set up so they can learn how to most efficiently repair leaks and things in the middle of the night when they're called out there. And so we have some footage of them working on that training equipment. And then Alex, if you'll go to that next slide, please. And so in September, we aired that very first one, and we got a lot of good feedback from our staff and from other community members that we interact with on a regular basis. And we're also continuing to air this TV spot a little bit more this week, partnering up with our Imagine a Day Without Water awareness. And so you'll see that if you follow us on Facebook or if you follow us on YouTube. If you're interested and haven't seen that spot and don't see our promotions, I urge you to go ahead and like us on Facebook, follow our Facebook page, check out our YouTube channel, and because we're going to start rolling out a lot more custom TV spots like this. And that'll be handling the sewer side and also some of our support areas within the organization and the different pieces that we do to support the community behind the scenes. So does anybody have any questions about this or?
Any community reaction to it?
Not yet, but we're looking. I have a feeling we'll see a lot more community reaction once we get more out there officially. We're really starting to leverage our social media page and put a lot more of our history from our history book, the 100-year history book we've got. We're actually bringing that to life on social media over the next couple of months. So hopefully once there's a lot more content, the community will start responding more. So. All right.
Thank you, Adrian. Well,
Thank you.
I just subscribed to the YouTube channel, so I'll check out the other videos as well.
Great. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm here to talk about our Uptown Park combined sewer overflow project that we've got. This is this facility is currently experiencing some challenges removing accumulated grit and the vortex separators, and the challenge is doing it in a safe manner. We've currently identified and proposed a project in the 2020 and 2024 capital improvements plan to do some revisions to the existing piping at this facility, which will allow us to do the maintenance in a safe manner. What we've done in preparation of this project, we've already done what's called a basis of design, so we've gotten into a little bit deeper details as far as getting into the design, how we're going to do this and what this is going to look like. And in this analysis, there were some recommendations made by Bars Design Solutions that will allow us to let me get my camera on here. Apologize. Recommendations that were made that will allow us to not just maintain the grid accumulation, but prevent the grid accumulation. There we go. And some of these, if you look at some of my images, we can go to the next slide. What you'll see here is there are some P-trap looking plumbing in that picture on the left. And what happens there is some of the grit it does what it accumulates there. And it's very difficult to get that accumulated grit out, and it happens on a very frequent basis. The thought is, instead of going in there with that P-trap, to go in there with more of a sweeping type elbow, and that will help the grit move. What this is here is and I'll talk about that in a second. This is a system that takes water from the top of the vortex, recycled water where grit has been removed, and it puts it back into the grit vortex, which will fluidize the grit. The grit alone will not pump. It's very difficult to pump, so you have to fluidize it, add water to it to help it move. And so this kind of exacerbates the issue. This is what you're adding to the water to help it move, and because you've got grit accumulated in it, it stops it up, and then you can't fluidize the grit. So one recommendation is to revise this piping. Another recommendation is to add additional fluidization piping, which will be supplied from potable water. So the original project is to revise piping to allow us to maintain it. These recommendations would prevent accumulation altogether. And so next slide, please. And so what we are requesting at this time, the current project to revise the piping to help with maintenance is around $806,000. And it is funded out of our GFA loan from our capital improvements plan. What we are requesting is an additional $1.5 million, and that would help us revise the plumbing to prevent the accumulation of grit. And that would bring this project to a total of $2.3 million, $2,305,000. And this additional $1.5 million would be funded out of our 2021 GFA loan request in January. And I can answer any questions if you have any.
Kevin, did you say that the current project is in the 800,000 range?
Correct. It is $806,000 in our current CIP, and that is to revise some piping, which will allow us to maintain, which will allow us to go in there and remove the accumulated grit. This additional 1.5 will give us some improvements that will help prevent the grit from accumulating altogether.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments for Kevin regarding this request? Okay. Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion for approval of this project.
Move it.
There's a motion from Sanders. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Becky. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. The project's approved, Kevin.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Today, we would like to update the board on the schedule for funding the CIP through GEFA, or the Georgia Environmental Finance Authority, and a recent interest rate change with this funding. As you may recall, during the May 11th Board of Water Commissioners meeting, the board approved Columbus Waterworks to continue to explore the option of state revolving funds obtained through GEFA to fund the CIP. Since this time, extensive work has been completed in engineering to ensure that all the projects meet the EPD requirements. The loan application was completed and submitted to GEFA on August 28, 2020. This is in relation to the 2020 CWSRF and the 2020 DWSRF funds. These funds are limited to $25 million each per fund per year. This schedule reflects the additional $1.5 million in funding that Kevin had presented for the Uptown Park CSO grit improvements. Since those were approved, now those will be included in the 2021 loan application for the CWSRF. That $800,000 that he mentioned, that's above it in the 2020 CWSRF for a combined total of that $2.3 million. On September 10th, we received a call from GEFA that interest rates would be adjusted for the loan request based on debt funding they had performed, a debt refunding that they had performed. This resulted in a 0.13 interest rate for the 20-year CWSRF and 20-year DWSRF loans for Water First communities. This is a reduction from the previously presented 0.94% interest rate that we anticipated these loans would receive. We had also presented an estimated savings compared to a bond funding of about 2% at about $15 million that would be saved compared to that. This now will result in an estimated savings of about $25 million of savings over the 20-year life of both loans to include the issuance cost. So great news. So there's the 0.13%. That's reflected on the GEFA website for Water First communities, which CWW is a Water First community. Lastly, this reflects the anticipated completion schedule for the GEFA loans. As noted, since the funds only allow the $25 million each year, we will submit the 2021 loan application by November 1st. That will be taken to the GEFA board in January for approval. The 2020 application has been with GEFA for a little less than 2 months and will be taken to the GEFA November 5th board meeting for approval. GEFA allows 6 months for the final paperwork. Therefore, we will come to the Board of Water Commissioners with both the 2020 and the 2021 requests combined. If approved, it will be taken to the city for approval since CWW is not a taxing authority. I think, as you can tell, this process is a little lengthier than the bond funding, yet the savings are well worth it. So I don't know if we have any questions on that or comments.
Alice, that's fantastic. With the rate decrease and the savings, thank you for researching this and proposing it. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Alex, are any lawyers or anybody helping you on this, or does GEFA have their own legal staff, or who's going to prepare all the documents for all this stuff?
GEFA prepares the documents, so they'll prepare all of their loan documents. They do have a 1% issuance cost that they charge, and usually the bonds run about a 2% issuance cost. Right. So that'll be rolled up into the loan. But GEFA will do that piece of it. We also have to have an attorney that approves the GEFA piece as well. So Halbu Smith will do that piece for us. As they did that just recently when we did the extension waiver just recently on the GEFA piece a few months ago, where they waived interest for about a 6-month period. And we'll go ahead and pay the principal balance off. We had to get an attorney letter on that one as well. So this one, after it's been approved, we'll have to get the attorney letter as the final step to go back to GEFA. Yes, sir.
So in addition to being a very low interest rate, your expenses for origination should be less. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right, so I'll turn it over to Mr. Davis for the rate study update.
Thank you, Alex, and good afternoon, Chairman and board members. It's that time of year where we do our rolling financial analysis. Joining me today will be Alex will participate, and Joe Correa with Raftellus. So I will give a little bit of a background and then try to give a persuasive points about why infrastructure is so important to us, and then show you a few pictures where I think pictures are worth 1,000 words. So I will really say a lot in a few words, hopefully here. So to recap, the rate increase that we put in effect in January, about this time last year, you'll recall that we were doing a rate change that was somewhat different than our typical rate increase, which is generally volumetric. We were standardizing our base charges for large meters, and unfortunately, we surprised a number of customers in that. They didn't know what size meters they had, so when they saw an increased bill for larger meters, they let us know about it. So we took a lot of follow-up action. We wrote about 4,000 letters to customers that had larger meters. That manifested itself into about 200 calls back to our customer advocacy manager, and he would often talk with them and explain why their meters were larger and why that was probably in their best interest to retain a large meter. He would go on site with them and meet, and I think 15 of them chose to downsize the meter because the reason they had upsized the meter earlier on didn't make sense anymore. So we agreed to downsize those meters at no cost to the customer. Now there is an agreement if their water service is not satisfactory with the downsizing, if there's any cost to re-upsize it, again, that they would incur that cost. But so far we haven't had any issues. We also waived the reconnection fee. This way it allows customers that have irrigation meters, when the irrigation season is coming to an end, they can call us. We'll cut off their irrigation meter. They won't pay any base charges during the non-watering season. Then they'll call us back in the spring to connect that meter, open it back up, and there's no $30 reconnection fee. We waived that. So that way the customers do have the opportunity to save that base meter fee when they're not putting that added demand on the system for higher flow volumes. We also made some adjustments to some fire line meters that we had, and we also increased our communication on the low income credit program. I think Alex will talk more to that. And so what we've kind of learned from this last rate increase, we do need to do a better job of communicating with our customers. And so this year, in addition to our normal process of first presenting it to the board and then going to city council for a public hearing, we will also have these two virtual town hall meetings. One will be October 21st and one November 4th. And then assuming it all goes well, then we would propose to come back to the board with any public comments to the November 16th board meeting and hopefully get a recommendation to approve at that time. So today what the board is looking to do is just approve us to go forward with the public communication part. You're not approving a rate increase at this point in time. And this is just an example of some of the 4,000 letters of communication we had with our customers explaining in more detail the larger meter upcharge. And then the benefits of the rate increase is it continues to provide revenue stability and allows us to be consistent with our annual rate adjustments that lead to long-term lower rates, avoids those spikes in rates that that occur if we go a couple of years without a rate increase, and then to keep reinvesting in infrastructure, we have a kind of a painful catch-up time with higher rate increases. So this way, we try to minimize those cost impacts to the customers by keeping these rate increases on the small side annually. In terms of the benefit it provides is it allows us just to renew and reinvest in infrastructure, and that allows us to keep clean drinking water, reliable drinking water flowing to our customers, and it also keeps the sewer flowing in the pipes and minimizes opportunity for it to have a negative impact on the water environment. And you can kind of see the background of this slide. That is a look at aerial of our water plant. So you kind of get a sense of the magnitude of our infrastructure. There's a lot of concrete, a lot of steel, a lot of pipes, a lot of pumps, a lot of electrical components in that site. And that plant was first constructed in 1914. It's not getting any younger. We're reinvesting in it to keep the critical pieces renewed, but that is part of our challenge. And our purpose is we protect our neighbors by providing essential water, the fuel of life. And I hope that y'all will see that purpose carried through and the kind of the justifications that I'm giving you for rate increase, because that's what we'll also be trying to communicate to our customers. We don't do these rate increases because we want to. We do it because we care about our customers and the environment, and we know it takes good infrastructure to provide the level of service we need to provide. So properly functioning pipes, pumps, plants are essential for us to deliver clean, reliable drinking water and to convey the wastewater for proper treatment so it doesn't impact our streams and river. Failing infrastructure puts our public health, drinking water, and environmental health, sewer discharges at higher risk. It's CWW's responsibility as public stewards of the public and environmental health relative to these systems to operate them and maintain them at levels that are mandated by the state and federal regulatory requirements. So if we failing infrastructure will cause us to have compliance violations. And there are a number of cities around the country that have failed to maintain their infrastructure very well, and the EPA will rein in on them and charge them or impose some very expensive programs on them. And we certainly want to always avoid that. We want to be driving the boat, not have somebody else come in and tell us how to spend our ratepayers' money. Aging and wear and tear on infrastructure is just relentless. It's ongoing. We can't just hit the pause button and let it stop for a while. The cost of replacing failed infrastructure under emergency situations can be 3 to 5 times higher than what it is if we have it planned, particularly in the case of a collapsed sewer line. If we can catch a line and CIPP line it or pipe burst it before it collapses, and we have to do open cut replacement and pavement replacement, you can see that it's a lot more cost effective to do it in a planned circumstance. And here you get another background view of our infrastructure. This is the aerial of our wastewater treatment plant. You see it's pretty expansive, a lot of infrastructure there. And it's very much a harsh environment where you got a lot of more aggressive chemicals in place down there trying to eat up the infrastructure down there. And here you see our vision is to be recognized by our customers and employees as providing the most caring experiences. So it's hard to tell a customer we care about you, so we're going to raise your rates, but it is because we care about them and we want to maintain the level of service that we do. That is why we have to raise rates and try to minimize our ability. So if we have failing pipes under roadway that puts the traveling public at risk, the cost of replacing failed infrastructure that's not part of our CIP or not part of our annual pay-go can put a financial burden on our reserves and draw them down. And then to replenish our reserves, it puts pressure to have a rate increase to keep our finances in good shape. Failure is not an acceptable option. infrastructure failure will occur if we don't follow through with the planned and prudent investments that we've been doing for years, and we think we have a good system in place. We just try to stay the course. The minimum annual rate increases help us to sustain the consistency of our process of identifying, planning, financing, designing, constructing, and operating these systems kind of in the cycles that we talk about. And doing this rolling annual rate increase, having a good understanding of our assets allows us to levelize the revenue to match expenses so we don't have, so we can minimize the cost impact to our customers. So if we were to replace all of our current plant, pipe, tank, all of our pump, all its dollars, a rough estimate might be $2.5 billion. And based on some numbers I've seen for plant upgrades, that's probably on the low side. And we have a variety of life cycle costs in all the assets that we have. You get into some of the IT kind of high-tech assets, their service life is pretty short. When you get into water mains, their life, fortunately, is 75 to 100 years. But we've got some water mains that are over 100 years and still providing good service to our customers. So currently, we've been averaging about $2.3 million a year reinvestment in our wastewater collection system, about $2.2 million a year reinvestment in the water distribution system. And unfortunately, that's on the light side. We really need to be, for the life cycle of these assets, we need to be investing more. And our plan is to try to slowly increase those investments while we try to minimize the cost impact to our customers at the same time.
Steve,
Yes, sir.
assuming that you get the rate increase that you're talking about, what will be the new level of those two numbers, 2.3 and 2.2?
I think the first year keeps it relatively consistent. Alex, if you can help me out, I think we're anticipating it ramping up in our forecast. Joe, you can help me out too, where we do begin to accumulate more into that renewal and replacement category, not so much in the first year, but the second, third, we were kind of, and the rate increases, I think that you'll see with the Joe and Alex present are remain relatively low compared to the 4.95 projections we had seen before. So we'll be seeing bigger money available to go into those categories, but not so much in this first year. We'll still stay around that $2 million for each category this upcoming year.
Yes, sir.
Alex,
I was just going to say, yes, sir. Basically, it's what you said. I mean, it's about that $5 million that next year, but then it ramps up more and more each year to about a little over $8 million toward those later years, and that's all of capital R&D and capital.
So what's the pool of dollars that we're going to generate by a 3.95% rate increase? What's the projected pool of new dollars? Alex?
Alex, good.
About $4 million is usually what our rate increase generates per year. That's if we realize all of it.
Okay, let's assume we realize 75% of it, just for the hell of it. That means we're going to have $3 million more next year, right? Where are those $3 million going if they're not going to infrastructure?
Well, it's not just all water and sewer pipes. We've got other items identified in our capital improvement program that it will help fund. I don't have that list of we can send you that list of projects if you'd like to see it.
Let me make a suggestion. Let me make a suggestion then. There probably should be another bullet on this page that talks about the amount of dollars that we're spending for capital improvement in total, as opposed to just wastewater distribution, water distribution, and wastewater collection.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, we'll add that. Sanders, thank you. Good point.
I think what we're trying to tell them is we spent a lot of money on this. The capital budget for next year, if I recall, is far greater than the 2.3, far greater than the sum of the 2.3 and the 2.2. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the number that we should be focused. I mean, I like the idea of having these in there, but I think the number that you really got to focus on is what you're spending every year.
This is the number we're spending.
If it's borrowed money, you got to pay it back. So
Yeah, this is just the annual pay-go part. It's not the debt finance part. Yeah, so we can add a bullet that elaborates on the debt finance part, as well as some of the pay-go that's not identified in these two categories.
Right. Okay.
I'll say too, Steve, y'all did a great job putting the narrative into bullet points instead of the previous version we had with just more of the data. This is really what we were talking about in our meeting, is make these all talking points. So y'all did a great job. It looks really good.
I would agree with that.
Thank you.
This is how I would like for you to see it every year, telling the story about this ties into everything you're doing in much simpler terms.
Okay.
And if Raftellus wants to use this in other models, then we've got a first right case here, and we'll expect a royalty on that.
And that's on the record, Joe. So
They should be paying us.
So next, I'll show you a few pictures just of kind of our CWW battling with the current condition of infrastructure. And talking to Jeremy Cummins, he says we average about one emergency a week in terms of, responding to these kind of things on both the water and sewer side. So you can imagine if we don't reinvest, don't find these problems and fix them, how that can increase in frequency and how that'll disrupt service to our customers. So upper left, you see a water line. That picture pretty much shows the destructive power of that water coming out of there at high pressure, washing the road and dirt away. And you can see the guys there kind of in the middle there repairing the line. And just to the right of there, you see one of our guys down there tightening up a clamp on the leaking water main. And that probably wouldn't be too bad on a 95-degree day in the summertime, but if it was 20 degrees in the wintertime, we're still out there doing it, whether it's so that's just the committed team we have out there trying to stay one step ahead of the failing infrastructure. And then you see the bottom left, that's a piece of unreinforced 8-inch concrete pipe where you can see there's a hole in the wall of the pipe, and then that tends to manifest itself into pictures like you see up there with that barrel where the pavement is beginning to fail. And then we come in and do an open cut replacement and put the road back in, to the right of that. So you can see how expensive that is when things fail to the point where we have to do the open cut versus go in and do something similar to what our guys are doing on the far right, where they're have got a planned project where they're pipe bursting and replacing a old failing sewer line without having to do pavement replacement. Of course, you might not want to challenge these guys to a tug of war contest. I don't think it'd go well for you. And here's just another shot of some of our larger infrastructure, some of our capital improvement projects that we've done. That one on the upper left is our South Plant Digester project. Y'all may recall as we signed the contract and awarded that to the contractor, the lid on this digester failed. And so finally they've got it all cleaned out and they're about to start building a new lid. But now, so this is a relatively dated picture now because that new lid is in place, but just gives you a sense of the scope of the infrastructure down there. And down below that, You see a guy inside one of the pipes in the influent pump station at the South Plant where that pipe condition was deteriorating. He's putting a lining on that to extend the life of the pipe. To the right of that, you see our guys at the water plant building a foundation for some chemical storage bins they've got. And to the far right, you'll see a contractor putting in a new force main that goes across Lake Oliver. It's replacing an existing force main. They'll trench that in, sink that pipe down into the trench, and then anchor it so it stays in place. But if you ran that old force main to failure, you would certainly start, losing sanitary sewer out into the lake. So that's what we do to protect our environment. And so hopefully trying to build some trust with our customers or retain trust with our customers. These are some of the things we do to try to be very good stewards of their rate dollars. We try to drive cost efficiency the best we can. We get competitive pricing for construction, equipment, and material purchase. We have a qualification process to select excellent consultants for design, so we get well-designed projects that will last a long time and operate efficiently. We seek most cost-effective debt financing, for example, what Alex was talking about, that 0.13% interest rate that is saving us a considerable amount of dollars for our ratepayers over the life of the loan. And we also strive to coordinate our future debt with our retiring debt to avoid any kind of high debt periods where we'd have to have costs to cover those, or again, trying to levelize our rate increases. And we also try to drive cost efficiency throughout the culture of CWW, but just asking lots of questions. Is this the best way to do it? Is there a cheaper way to do this, one that lasts a long time? And just, trying to instill that our customer dollars are like their own. So be wise in how we spend them. And this talks a little bit how we have increased our pay-go. It used to be about 10 years ago, only we were putting about $30,000 a month per bond covenant into that R&E account, and now we've increased that to about $4 million a year, so we can just keep rolling and reinvesting into primarily the water system and the collection system. And we also strive to meet financial performance expectations by meeting our bond coverage and our operating reserves. Here again, we've been doing this rate analysis with Joe and Raftella since 2002, and the intent is to be able to manage our system wisely and minimize the cost impacts to our customers. And unless you have other questions or comments on my portion, I'll hand it off to Alex.
Any questions for Steve? This is a great looking proposal, Steve. I really like how y'all made changes. So kudos to you and everyone else who was involved in updating it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
As part of the rate study update, we also wanted to provide an update to the board as it relates to the coronavirus impact to CWW customers, and as well as CWW's response. This is a summary. I know Becky Butts and I both provided some of the financial and customer updates in the past, but just kind of want to give you an update on where we were right now. During the waiver of the delinquent bill fees and the hold on disconnects, we reached a peak in May. This peak resulted in about 1,800 customers that were on the disconnect list. As the board had suggested direct contact prior to resuming any disconnections, during the week of June 15th, door hangers were put out to each one of the customers, notifying each one of them on the list and encouraging them to call for payment arrangements prior to any disconnections of their service. In August, the level returned to a normal level of about 300 per week. Currently, we're seeing about anywhere from 200 to 400 each week, or they're relatively back to a normal level. As encouraged on the door hangers to customers, CWW responded and offered customer payment plans. While CWW had always offered payment plans, the dates were extended to 6 months if needed, and CWW customer service representative worked with each customer to set up a plan. During the peak, we saw 900 customers sign up for the payment plans. This is compared to about 200 at historical levels. Currently, we have about 300 customers that are on a payment plan. Additional impacts include residential water sales that were above projections and commercial and industrial water sales that were below projections during this time. Also, I know how Mr. Davis had referred to the low-income credit program. The board had mentioned this several times, and during January, we really put forth an effort. We promoted the program by providing enrichment services, about 2,500 flyers for them to hand out while they did their LIHEAP interviews. We also included messages on the January bill and bill inserts. We also did messaging on our social media, the blog, and we ran special TV spots that aired during the month of January.
Alex.
We did.
Alex, I'm sorry, this is Becky. On the social media and the blog, don't we have the opportunity to do that more than just in January?
We do, and they continue. I mean,
are we doing that on social media throughout the year to promote that?
Not only in January, we also encouraged it on the actual the door hangers that we put out. And during that time, we put that, I mean, when we saw the peak of the coronavirus, we also put out a lot of media on not only the low income credit, but we also did an outreach with the agencies in the area. And when we referenced to call them as well if they needed any help.
Right. I guess what I'm asking is, even in non-COVID times, do we do social media promotion or awareness building of the low-income credit program all throughout the year? Because if we don't, I think we're missing an opportunity. People don't just do that in January, so I think we should be all year round promoting that. And social media is the easiest way to do that. We might not be able to do TV spots all year, but we could do social media. So just a thought.
Absolutely. Yes, we can certainly add that. We've also, just to give you an update too, just as recently as last week, since Enrichment Services Program, they're not meeting face-to-face anymore and doing the interviews. They're actually doing interviews virtually and then having them drive by and sign the paperwork. So just last week, we had worked with Enrichment Services Program as well as the city. And Enrichment Services Program is actually going to help if someone comes in and qualifies. They're going to help them fill out the paperwork and make any copies for them, and then deliver that to in a batch to the city. So this just started, like I said, last week we were working with them. So kind of getting that geared up and seeing what we can do to continue to promote that as well.
Okay, thank you.
So certainly, we did have a small increase in it, as you can see, but certainly hasn't been a huge growth in the program. We did also, Becky, just to kind of, we tried to see, a lot of times what we get as the feedback is perhaps that individual is in a multi-unit and they don't have garbage services, or they do not have a separate water meter. That's kind of a lot of the feedback, because, we were trying to figure out I think there's about 4,000 on the LIHEAP program. But, we're not reaching anywhere near that numbers on our low income credit piece.
Because it has to be connected to the garbage, right? Is that correct?
They have to have it does, but they also have to have a separate meter for water. And so a lot of these multi-units would not have a separate meter for water. And a lot of them would have a they wouldn't have separate garbage as well. They would just have a garbage service with their multi-unit.
Right. I know we've discussed this before and I don't remember all the details, but I just would continue to ask why we cannot separate those and offer the credit, water credit, without having to tie it to the garbage collection. So, and I don't want us to get dragged down, and we got a busy meeting today, but I'm just putting that back on the table as why can't we do that? Why can't we figure that out?
Let's get an update to Becky for that at the next meeting. Would that be okay, Alex? And tell
Yes.
the board with the answer why that can or cannot happen. Great point, Becky. Thank you for making that.
Thanks.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, accounts receivable. We did see a peak in this in May as well. Yet they seem to have returned to historical normal levels. CWW also waived delinquent fees during COVID-19 and has continued to waive them in an effort to relieve any financial burden CWW customers may be experiencing during this time. Overall, CWW has made adjustments and worked with our customers. We do not want to see our customers have interruptions in service. Rather, we want to ensure they have clean, safe drinking water. As we start to review a little bit of the details and the assumptions that are in the rate study, the next few slides will include assumptions in the financial model. This reflects the baseline of the financial plan included in the model. These are consolidated expenses to include Fort Benning. The increase in operations is as historically reflected in the model with some assumptions built in. The target in the model also includes increases in the fund balances and ensuring that we meet our debt coverage ratios. Some of the feedback that we had gotten when we did our refunding in 2019 was to increase some of our fund balances to keep or exceed our ratings with the agencies. This graph reflects the trend that we've seen over the years, which reflects a decrease in the average use per month in residential water use. The assumptions in the model also includes a water sales by class. The model reflects a slight decrease in each class, or in some classes flattening out with a small increase in multifamily. Of course, our largest class is the residential class on the upper left. This next graph depicts our actual consumption, which is running slightly over projections at 30.7 actual and 29.9 projected year to date through September 2020. This correlates, yet not exactly dollar to dollar on the revenue side, as we're at 99% of actual to budget on water revenue sales. Slightly under, but as you can tell, certainly running close to projections year to date for both consumption and revenues. And this is a similar graph to the first one. This excludes the Fort Benning. The plan continues to reinvest in the infrastructure, and this is what we're driving the increases. The top section of the graph depicts the capital expenditures with some city participation in there as well. The debt service remains pretty consistent. There is a drop off in the debt service between the fiscal year 23-24 to 24-25. And this is replaced with our GFA debt that will be picked up and anticipated about closing around that time. There's also a projected inflationary increase in the operating expenses that's built in the model as well. I don't know if we have any questions on that. If not, I'll turn it over to Joe Crea with Raft Tellus to discuss the financial plan and the impacts of the increase proposed.
Yeah, I got a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Are these numbers, let's talk about the capital outlay, just as an example. Are these numbers inconsistent with what we were asking for on the rate increase? I mean, we're not seeing significant capital outlay and city participation increases, and we're not seeing significant debt service increases. So help me understand that. I'm sitting in the audience when you're making your town hall presentation, and you talked about you're going to be spending more money for infrastructure and improvements and all of that. And then I see those numbers and I don't see it. You follow me?
Yeah, so these numbers,
I may just be missing something. What am I missing?
these numbers are kind of the underlying costs that our financial plan is supporting. And I think to your point, part of it is that on a longer term historical view, you would see a big difference between the top two columns on these graphs and what we have for the current year and the future. So the 8.95 million ramping up to the 11.82 million, that's a significant increase over where we had been in the last 5 and 10 years. And so we might be missing some of that difference by only looking at kind of where we're planning to be this year and in the future.
And so,
Okay, I'm not certain that answers my question, but
was a lot of that capital outlay on equipment and infrastructure?
Yeah, well, historically. Go ahead, Steve.
It's on mute.
But most of the green that's part of this, what we call pay-go, right?
Steve, you were talking, but we couldn't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Becky, I was muted. I think we have some, Alex, Joe, some of our capital in our O&M, just our annual operating capital for rolling stock, things like that. Is that right? And
in this graphic, it gets included in the green component. The departmental capital is included in there.
Okay.
On those numbers. So that's both sort of equipment, rolling stock, and the infrastructure piece for the pay-go that you mentioned there, Reynolds, as well. That's in there. And what we've tried to do is kind of average it over a 5-year period. So we're building up to a kind of the investment level we want to be at year 4 and 5. You can see getting $11, $12 million. That's kind of the number. That's where we'd like to be. That's a lot more than the 2.2 million you saw on the previous slide. We've chosen to kind of backload that to smooth the forecast a little bit, but it's getting there. It's just we're taking our time to ramp those costs up.
Okay.
So, Senators, what I'm hearing, we need to kind of huddle and talk a little internally on how to present this capital stuff a little clearer, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think if the message that we're trying to communicate is, the primary reason that we're raising rates is to invest in infrastructure. And Alex said a few minutes ago, that's $4 million a year for the rate increase. And assuming we only get 75% of it, that's $3 million a year. Where's it going? And this picture doesn't help me see where it's going.
Okay.
And maybe certainly we can change the picture, but historically we were running a little over $7 million, or just recently, not necessarily all 5 years ago. But even if you take that 7 million, you're looking at 35 million compared to here, Senators, you're looking at $50 million if you add up those 3 years on here ramping it up.
Yeah, but hypothetically, this year's rate increase, okay, should generate $15 million for you over 5 years, right?
Yes.
You've taken the base, you've raised $3 million. Assuming you do nothing, you're going to have that $3 million going out forward. You do nothing else in the future years, right?
Well, each year in the future, there is escalation built into the operating costs that would eat away at that $3 million. You can see that the O&M costs there are increasing.
I
So
see that.
that would eat away at some of that.
But it doesn't, in the worst case scenario, the operating expense is only going up by $7 million. That's only 50% of it. Right? I just think that something's just not quite right with the picture, at least in my opinion. Reynolds, what do you think?
What was the intent of this slide, Joe?
Well, we've historically had this in there to kind of demonstrate what the costs that our revenue is trying to recover are based on. So, our intent basically to show that we've got a long-term inflationary factor on our operating expenses. There's no large incremental increases on the O&M. We're gradually, increasing our debt service. And previously, this looked a good bit different because the GFA loan, we didn't have that great interest rate and the financing was different. So that now kind of demonstrating that we're able to smooth out our debt service and at the same time incrementally get our capital expenses up to kind of that longer term level where we want them to be kind of by year 5 of this plan. And that's sort of where
This slide after the GFA rate reduction?
Sorry.
Did this slide change after the GFA rate reduction? Did you increase the capital outlays after we received notice of the rate reduction of GFA?
A little bit. We've been playing around with that capital outlays number throughout the last couple of months of this process to balance kind of the cash reserves position Alex mentioned previously, to balance what our revenue rate increase target would be. So as we adjust the rate increase up or down, the capital outlay is really that knob where we can dial in what the rate increase kind of needs to be. That's our easiest cost to move. It's that. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess what I'm hearing is, and I don't remember what the slide looked like, but these numbers were lower prior to the GFA loan getting locked in. Is that correct?
Yes, they were a little bit last year. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, the capital outlay, those numbers were less.
A year ago, correct.
Okay.
Sanders, your question, is your question about, I want to make sure that I understand, because I do have a point of view, but I may be focusing on the wrong thing. You're saying of a potential $4 million annually in rate increased revenue, assuming we get 75% of it, then you back it down to $3 million. And we're making the case that the $3 million is going to improve our outlay, our capital outlay on infrastructure, because we're spending today at a level below what we probably should be. Am I right? You're on mute.
Yes, that's correct.
But when you look at this, but your point is, and I want to make sure I understand it correctly. Your point is, when you look at this slide, you don't see that $3 million increase in capital outlay, correct?
That's correct. Actually, moving from 2021 to 21-22, you see a decrease.
Decrease, right. So to me, the question becomes, what slide or visual best depicts where the revenue from the rate increase is really going?
That's good. That's well said.
Yeah,
We
and
don't really see that here,
I don't see it here.
is what we're
That's
saying.
That's
yeah, well,
correct.
all of it's not going to capital. Probably about half of it is going to O&M.
Well, then we need to say that then.
Yeah, yeah.
Or change, yeah.
You put that together well, Becky. Thank you. That's what we were trying to say. Does that make sense, Steve, Joe, and Alex?
Yeah, we'll put together some presentation information and send it to y'all and see if it helps clarify this. And we appreciate
I may just be the only one who sees it like that. You guys may see it perfectly clearly the way it's done.
And I would need to go back and actually, and I don't have that ability right here, but Steve, you sent me these slides and I'll look at it after this is over with. But this previous slides to me really do focus on, here's why we need to keep having these rate increases, because we're not investing in our infrastructure repair and keeping it up to date. So you put a lot of emphasis on that in the prior slides, but then you get here and your numbers don't appear to reflect that. So I think maybe it's just a matter of emphasis
That was my
on
point.
how. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think as much as I'd like to see a bigger investment in infrastructure, that's where we're trying to balance this cost impact things. But yeah, there should be an increase in the capital if that's what, and it ought to be reflected in these slides. So we'll go back and reevaluate this and provide you some clarity on this.
Yeah, and if the answer really is that as much of it that our increase in operating expenses just has to go up every year, and we need to plan for that, and part of the rate increase is truly for that, then we just need to be honest with people and say that, and then as much as we can put toward infrastructure, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, and I think
But when you the biggest increase every year is in your operating expenses.
Yeah, and I think in past years we've kind of identified about whether it's a 50-50 split or a 40-60 split in terms of what the rate increase would go toward, and I think that would help clarify this if we could do that here.
Yeah,
I agree.
good point.
Well, we'll certainly revise this slide and have it more too. Maybe even depict what we've historically done on the infrastructure and what we plan on doing too. I think that would help.
Okay.
Okay, I think this is where I'll pick back up. Alex and Steve have done a nice job. Reynolds, as you mentioned earlier, with talking about the capital drivers, we just had a good conversation about, making sure that conversation is brought full circle. And a lot of the bullet points on this slide kind of get back to what we had just discussed, where the process of having a 5-year rolling financial plan has really served Columbus Waterworks well. We've historically had a kind of baseline target to keep the annual rate increase at around or below 4.95%. As we've mentioned, for 2021, we've adjusted our plan and we're recommending a across the board increase of 3.75% for all rates and charges for all customer classes. So every customer would see a same 3.75% rate increase with all other things being equal, for example, water usage. We're able to do that coming off the heels of a strong fiscal 2020 water sales year. So we had a strong financial position at the end of that year, even despite a weak fourth quarter for non-residential customers due to the pandemic's impacts on businesses. And what the 3.75% will allow us to do is, as we discussed already, continually investing in the infrastructure throughout the system, and do that in a nice, regular way to minimize the long-term impacts on rates. We did run various scenarios, and if we wait a year or two and skip a rate increase, it actually yields a higher charge to customers in year 4, year 5, because you need more to get back to the same spot. And those increases gradually over time allow us to support the operating costs, the capital costs throughout the system. And the important thing, I think also that, every year we re-look at what are our true operating expense needs, what are our real capital expense needs, and that's where we have the opportunity to deviate and potentially reduce future increases, because every year we come back and do take a look and we kind of truth test, pressure test what those forecasted numbers were. And that's why we have kind of a 5-year projection, but we only ask for a single year's rate at a time. In addition, we have accounted for adjusting the low income credit as Alex previously described.
Okay, here comes another dumb question, but I don't understand how increased water sales last year led to us decreasing the revenue increase this year.
So there's a little bit of additional kind of cash available that we could use to offset some of the capital expenses. And that the way that we project our revenues, and this maybe the more important way that comes into play, our revenues are projected based on an average of historical water sales, as well as kind of looking at what's happened for the first 3 months of this fiscal year.
Yeah.
So we know that residential
water sales are decreasing, not increasing.
For non-residential customers, that's absolutely true. Yep.
So I'm not certain that I understand. I just don't quite get that, but that's okay.
No, and I can try to explain it further if you'd like. I don't want to.
Sure.
Well, again, so when we project the revenue, it is based on what we think water use will be. So residential use was up last year because everyone was home. They're also up this year. So we've got more residential use, and that actually brings in a little bit more revenue because residential water rates are a little higher than non-residential, not by much. So that gives us a little bit of an increased revenue versus where we were previously. And then in addition, that's the primary reason on the revenue side. I don't know if that helps, but we can work to explain that.
It does. I mean, you're basically what you're doing is you're looking at it on a 1-year snapshot. You're saying, we sold more last year, we're selling more this year, so we don't need to increase the rate quite as much. I guess that's what you're saying, right?
That's true.
How does that fit with, with our prior discussion about needing to spend the money for infrastructure, or most of it for infrastructure, or a greater amount for infrastructure over time?
Well, I think they're two sides of maybe the same coin. I mean, we can generate the same amount of revenue that we need to responsibly invest in the system with a slightly lower increase.
2 weeks ago, when we had our preliminary look at all this, the recommendation was for an increase of 0. Okay. Right.
Yes.
So if initially we were talking about a 0% rate increase, was that based on increased water sales?
Yes. And we could get away with no increase this year. But to get to the same spot in year 5, we would need to do higher increases in the out years,
right,
of about 5.5%, I think was the number, rather than a more normalized 375 throughout.
Well, at the end of the day, too, Joe, we don't know how the weather is going to play into it, and you can't predict that people are going to stay home and use this much water. And I think we all agree that there needs to be an increase every year to cover our base, just the the base percentage increase in our operating budget. And I guess that's the point you're getting at, Sanders, is how do you approach that each year? You put together a 5-year plan, but we're really just going off of the previous 12 months data. Is that your point?
Yeah. I mean, look, if it were me, I'd take the first bullet out. Okay. It just seems inconsistent with everything else we're talking about. We're talking about a 5-year window, a 5-year plan, and we're talking about making a decision based on strong water sales, in 2 quarters, fourth quarter last year and the first quarter this year. That just doesn't, I'm not certain I understand the logic of that.
Yeah, I think sometimes we're, not that we feel guilty, but so we had a good year. Well, we've had some really bad years too. And we've got to make long-term plans. And this is just the rate you're recommending for this year. And it's part of our 5-year plan, not to discount, hey, we're doing this rate because we had a good year last year. This is what's best for the system, the organization, and it's part of our 5-year plan.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it.
I feel we don't need to defend or explain a reduced rate as the result of being fiscally responsible. That's what they expect us to be every year. And that's why I recommended a 3.75 instead of a 4.95 is we're being fiscally responsible to our customers as well. So yeah, I hope we don't ever think that we have to kind of say like we're doing this because we did a great job, we're going to give you a break this year. But hey, the rates change. We had a good year. We've got leadership and consultants that are helping us be fiscally responsible for our customers. That was even in one of the previous slides, I think. So yeah, I'd say take that one out and focus on just the main points of the plan.
Yeah, I would say the strong revenue year also helped kind of dampen out the trend we had seen that was declining. So this did allow us to kind of put a little bit of a bottom to what, had we kept declining like we had seen some of the previous years, the proposed increase would be more than what we're talking about here, I think.
Well, I'm not a statistician, but I don't think 2 quarters make a trend.
I hope we have a great 2021 and we can offer a 2.75 next year, but we don't know that yet. And I wouldn't want us to be at the same point next year and say, because we had 2 great years in a row, we're going to give you, zero rate. There's always got to be a rate increase because it's always part of the plan. And if we do really well for a certain period of time, then we can talk about ways to reinvest or give back. We talked about that in our meeting, Steve.
Yeah.
It should never be embarrassed or ashamed of running an organization extremely well. That gives you opportunity to make changes in the future. All right, okay. Let's keep moving on.
So we're take a quick look kind of back at the historic rate changes. Again, we've discussed this a little bit today. We have a kind of long-term plan that you can see in the middle of that table there in gray to be around 4.95% per year. And that's what you see the model generally has projected. There's a couple differences in there where it had to spike up because of a very low consumption year in 2019. If you compare that to what we typically see across the water industry, over the long term, water rates have increased more than 5 or 6% per year over the last 20 years, really, if you look back at data. And you can see information from an annual survey that the American Water Works Association publishes, indicating what respondents to that survey have had as an annual increase. So Columbus Water Works, the plan is beneath that. And then even more importantly, most importantly, really, The final row to that table are the actual rate increases that have been implemented every year. And you can see that we have always maintained that plan. And in doing so, that has given us the flexibility to be able to kind of consistently come in below plan and below the industry averages. The 10-year average that the Columbus Waterworks has been about a 3.5% increase over the same that 10-year period. And as you can see at the end of that column, 3.75%, that is the recommended change for 2021. As Steve mentioned, last year's increase included an adjustment to the base charges on the water to right size how much larger meters pay for their fixed charge. That was a one-time change. And this year, if we look at the base charges that are proposed for January of 2021, you can see that all of those charges are increasing by a consistent 3.75% increase. There might be a little bit of a rounding with getting it to the nearest penny, but all of those charges are going up by the same percentage, and we don't see that larger impact to the larger meters, which occurred last year again as the one-time right sizing. On the water volume charges, again, the same story that we are adjusting all of the rates by the same 3.75% increase. So a 7-cent per unit increase to tier 1 volume rates, same for block 2, and the residential tier 2 rate increases by 6 cents instead of the 7 cents. On the wastewater side of the ledger, again, very consistent, same story, 3.75% increase, which translates into about a 19-cent increase in the base charge. You can see there on the screen, a 13-cent increase on the volume rate that most customers pay. And that's for residential customers. The sewer rate is capped at 15 CCF, so you would not pay anything above that if you're a residential customer. Same charge adjustment applied to the CSO charges as well, which is a fixed charge per bill based on the quantity of water used. So how does that look when we explore typical customer bills? So we've historically shown an 8 CCF bill as a kind of typical resident or an average residential. That includes some of the large residential customers that would drive the average up. And you can see that their bill would increase by about $2.21 next year. However, most residential customers use less. Usually between 4, 5, or 6 CCF is the most commonly sent bill to residential customers. For a 4 CCF customer, you can see that their monthly bill would go up by $1.28. How does that compare regionally? As we've seen in previous years, Columbus Waterworks rates are consistently among the lowest sort of throughout the state and kind of comparable utilities throughout Georgia. You can see that for a 4 CCF bill, again, this is kind of that smaller typical residential customer. Columbus charges are less than Macon, Savannah, Augusta, Atlanta's always on the high end there. And Columbus Waterworks is competitive with Phoenix City. Phoenix City is a little lower at the moment. And all these rates are current as of today. Many of them might implement an increase in January, but we don't have that information to include in this graph at this time.
What's the difference between Columbus affordability and Columbus?
Oh, if you participate in the low income program, that's what your bill would look like with the credit for the low income program. And then So I think that leads us to kind of the closing slide. The important thing throughout our process and based on the feedback from the board, which we very much appreciated, is that the consistent annual increases, that does allow us to maintain lower long-term rates for customers. And that annual adjustment is lower than national averages, as we saw, and our 3.75% rate is lower than what we were projecting this time last year. So again, doing what we can to annually revisit this and make sure we're being fiscally responsible. We're going to, in the long term, continue to promote revenue stability through our rate increases. So future rate increases will account for that and make certain minor adjustments over time to reflect that. We'll continue to reinvest infrastructure through the CIP and through our use of PAYGO, and also promote affordability for customers who need that with an adjustment to the low income credit as well.
Joe, is there a industry standard for how the rate increase is applied? Is it capital, O&M? I know lots of authorities are different, but there's got to be something your company models in this rate. Say, hey, 40%'s got to go to this. It's increasing 5% every year. What's your answer for that, please?
Sure. Yeah. And like you said, it does vary quite a bit between utility to utility. So most utilities, when we're kind of thinking about the big picture, they would apply a rate increase very much like this one, that it's, an across the board rate, all the rates go up by the same. Most of our clients are also seeing rates driven by capital needs. A number of our clients kind of have huge consent orders that are driving billion-dollar programs, kind of a different animal. But many, really not many, all have the same infrastructure renewal and replacement requirements. We are starting to see some implement separate kind of infrastructure replacement charges, a couple of dollars a month per bill, which goes to fund asset management programs. So we are starting to see that, again, as utilities try to find ways, like we've discussed today, to justify and to explain clearly to customers, we're not raising rates because we're giving everybody 10% salary adjustments. It's because we have infrastructure that costs a lot of money to replace. And so folks are starting to add more delineation on their bills for where those charges are going. So we see some of that. At the end of the day, it kind of gets you back to the same spot. And most utilities try to get about 30% of their revenue from a fixed source, whether it's an infrastructure charge or just a base charge, and the remainder from a volumetric piece so that customers can still control their bill. And we try to kind of tie the capital components in with that fixed charge and the operating components to the other, although it's not a perfect one-to-one relationship.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for explaining that. Yep. We get it. It's all moving to a lot of base service charges because of consumption. The point we were all mentioning a few slides back about the O&M increase, instead of changing up that bar graph, could you add it as a bullet point here to explain that? These are your observations and conclusions that, 50% is going to this, 30% to that, 20% to this. Is that possible? Would that be a good idea?
Yeah, absolutely. I think to reinforce it there, and we can again speak to it earlier as a talking point also.
They may not pick it up on the bar graph, but at least you could say, hey, our rate increase, this is how it's being allocated.
And I will say generally from the way it's historically happened is that the operating costs have been where we've been able to pull off of the projected rate increase because generally our assumed inflation is more than what Waterworks has kind of realized when it comes to actual operating expenses. That's generally where we end up having savings. So that's a good point as well.
All right. This is an action item, Steve. You need our approval to take this to council. We're not approving the rate today. Why wouldn't we approve the rate today?
But typically what we do is go out into a public hearing period so that we can come back to you, the board, with comments that we receive. And then that way you're more informed when you do want to approve or disapprove.
Very good. Okay, so we need a motion to approve the executives of CWW to take this to city council and town hall meetings.
Move it.
There's a motion by Sanders. Is there a second? Second by Rodney. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Motion passes. Thank you, Joe, Steve, and Alex. I know this has been a long meeting, but appreciate you all listening to our questions and comments and recommending the changes that we'd like to see that I think would help this go very smoothly with the public and at our next board meeting. So it means a lot that y'all take the time to listen to our comments and respond. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, we certainly appreciate y'all's thoughtful comments because we want to get the information accurate because we're kind of in the weeds. So to get y'all's perspective, it helps us clarify the message we're trying to communicate. So thank you all very much.
Absolutely. You bet.
So at this
now, y'all kick him off. Well, is there any other questions or comments for any of the departmental reports?
I didn't have any, none.
Rodney, did you have any old or new business?
Not coming here, Ruby.
Oh, here's Steve.
Hey, my laptop died. I thought 40% battery life would have gotten me through, but
Y'all should know percentages by now, Steve.
yeah, no. Lesson learned. Start with 100%. And I'm in here with Alex, so I got my mask on.
Okay.
So I guess I missed it. Were there any questions on departmental?
No, sir.
Okay.
We'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
We have
Got one more item, just info for the board.
Sorry, I missed the last one. I apologize.
One of them, the top one is a big one that Wynn Ruff has been selected to receive the Thomas Y. Whitley Distinguished Alumnus Award, CSU. So congratulations to Gwen for that. And also the Columbus Waterworks, or not Columbus Waterworks, the Columbus River Walk is in the running for a 2020 People's Choice Award from the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. It's one of 12 projects across the country. And what it'll do is give Columbus some good PR for our Riverwalk. And I think there's maybe a $10,000 prize involved. But the bigger thing is the recognition. I know that years ago when they finished the Riverwalk, we did get an ICE-T grant from the DOT that helped with some amenities and signage and things like that. I'm not sure what else the city may have gotten from the DOT to help with the Riverwalk since then, but it's nice to have our collective project recognized nationally. So you do have opportunity to go out and vote for it. It's one of those you can vote every day from however many devices you have, I think. So essentially we can stuff the ballot box if we can. So please vote for the Riverwalk.
It's a great project. And if you hadn't seen that section of it, I encourage you to check it out. It's pretty amazing. And we're very proud of Gwen. I can't see if she's on the line, but very proud of her contributions to our community and especially with the United Way this year. Thank you. Thank you, Gwen. Oh, hey, Gwen, there you are.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it and appreciate your support and encouragement. It's
Absolutely.
definitely an honor. Thank you.
You're a great representative of this organization, our community, and a well-deserved award from your alumni. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, that's all we have for you.
That's all we've got today. Now, if there's not any other business, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move it.
There's a motion from Becky.
Second.
Second from Sanders. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Hearing that, we stand adjourned. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate
Thank you.
always listening. Thank you all for your comments today, for helping us have a meaningful meeting. And we'll see y'all soon.
Thanks, Randall.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.